What's going on, guys, and welcome back to WWE Network and Show, where I, Graham G.S. and Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network and on Peacock. And today we're talking the June 13, 2022 edition of Raw Talk. Once again, no Jackie Redmond this week. I think she's off covering, I think the Stanley Cup already wrapped up. I don't know. She does a lot of other things beyond WWE, so she wasn't here this week, being replaced again by Scott Stanford alongside Matt Camp. They had on... I don't think there was an analyst this week. Usually they had Peter Rosenberg. I'm trying to remember if it was Booker T or JBL, Jerry Lawler, whoever. It was Peter Rosenberg this week. It was fine. To start off the show, they recapped the ending to Raw from minutes earlier, where they had a pose down between Bobby Lashley and Theory, which was fine. Probably not the way I would have closed the show. I don't know if the NBA Finals had anything to do with that, but whatever. From there, they run down the biggest headlines from the show, including Alexa Bliss and Liv Morgan qualifying for the Women's Money in the Bank ladder match in a couple of weeks at the pay-per-view by beating Nikki Ash and Doudrop in tag team action. Recapping that matchup, and we hear backstage from Alexa Bliss and Liv Morgan with Sarah Schreiber. Bliss and Morgan both kind of argue over being, not really argue, but they kind of playfully go back and forth over who ultimately will be Miss Money in the Bank. Bliss and Morgan have nice chemistry together, as seen in this segment during their match on Raw. I wouldn't exactly advocate for them being tag team partners at some point coming out of that pay-per-view, just because, one, there's no women's tag team division to speak of. The tag team title tournament they were talking about a few weeks ago, there has been no mention of it since, and that was almost 3 or 4 weeks ago. So I get the feeling that we're probably not getting a women's tag team title tournament, which is fine. The tag team titles at this point, in theory, are a good idea. They will never be executed properly in this company. Maybe elsewhere, not here in WWE. It's just not a priority for them, so why even try? And not only that, I mean, Alexa Bliss has already had her fair share of tag team title reigns with Nikki Ash, Nikki Cross, or whatever. And Liv Morgan also used to team with Ruby Riott. She teamed with Rhea Ripley. She's had her fair share of partners as well. So I would rather both women just kind of move on and do their own thing. But that's just me. Peter Rosenberg says that everything is right when John Cena is around, and they kind of promote John Cena returning to Raw in a couple of weeks on the show. Matt Camp references that it was 1 year ago around this time that John Cena returned to WWE in time for, or at the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. And that come his anniversary, the 20-year anniversary of his debut on that June 27th Raw, the roles could be reversed this time around, which I've seen a lot of other people say as well, which I'd be all for. So as opposed to when John Cena debuted, remember, he answered the open challenge from Kurt Angle on SmackDown. Not that John Cena is going to be on the show issuing an open challenge, but the roles could be reversed in that Cena could be in the ring. He's the seasoned vet. Like, I mean, Kurt Angle wasn't a seasoned vet. He was in the company for fucking 3 years at that point. But you get what I'm saying. Like, he was the established top guy. Cena came out as a fresh face, answering that open challenge, and whatever. So maybe it could be a theory, which was also teased again on the show, or someone else completely new that we're not even thinking of. But that's what I would do. I would love to see something like that. From there, they replay Ezekiel versus Kevin Owens, a match that ended in Ezekiel winning by countout. And not only that, but we found out afterward from Ezekiel himself, who I interviewed about a week ago here on the channel, so check that out when you get a chance, G-plug. Not only that, but Ezekiel mentioned afterward, Elias is on his way back to Raw next week, and we're getting the return of an Elias concert. I have never been more excited for Elias in my life, assuming that we're getting him and Ezekiel in the same place at the same time next week on the show. And as I said on Twitter, as many other people have said, they really should be bringing in Aaron Stevens, formerly known as Damian Sandow, Mizdow in WWE, to portray Elias. That would be fucking funny, because they look alike anyway, with the similar, like, eye shape, if that makes sense. Like, they have a very similar facial structure, so that would be pretty fucking funny, and he's hysterical anyway, so I would love if they brought him in to portray Elias for one night, or just permanently, or whatever. I think that'd be amazing, but that's just me. Anyway, so I'm looking forward to that next week. From there, they recap MVP versus Cedric Alexander. MVP beat Cedric in like a minute or two. Cedric lost last week to Omos in like 8 seconds. He lost to and I like MVP, but he's basically a manager at this point. He lost to MVP the manager in 2 minutes. Cedric's days in WWE have got to be numbered at this point, I would have to imagine. Backstage, we hear from MVP and Omos with Kevin Patrick here on Raw Talk. MVP says that it's time to focus on bigger and better things. Kevin Patrick asks, could those bigger and better things be the Money in the Bank briefcase? MVP says, what a dumb question. Of course we're referring to the Money in the Bank briefcase. And Omos gets on the mic real quick and says that nobody can stop him and that Money in the Bank contract will be his. Good Lord, I have no fucking desire to see that at all. I mean, they were really pushing the narrative on this episode of Raw Talk. Not so much on Raw, I don't think, but because it wasn't like Omos was even in action this week. It was fucking MVP for some reason, which I don't mind, but it was just weird. The focus was supposed to be on Omos. I have no desire to see Omos in that men's Money in the Bank ladder match. He's not going to win. He shouldn't win. He shouldn't even be in the match. And Omos is better when he's limited. The Bobby Lashley feud was fine, but the guy is really not that great in the ring. Him in a ladder match sounds like a fucking disaster. So we've seen people like Mark Henry, Kane, Big Show, and the Money in the Bank ladder match before. The biggest difference there is that they're actually established. They're not bad. Omos is not good. Please do not put Omos in the Money in the Bank ladder match. I beg of you. Worse than that was back in the studio, Matt Camp teased the possibility of Omos maybe winning Money in the Bank and then cashing in on Roman Reigns. And the idea of a Roman Reigns-Omos match almost made me want to vomit. Not because of Roman Reigns, but because the idea of that match, and that would probably be fucking terrible. I mean, that just sounds terrible. That just sounds awful. So I hate that I even brought that up. From there, they recap AJ Styles versus Seth Rollins, the men's Money in the Bank qualifier won by Rollins. And they also recap Riddle taking on Ciampa. Riddle will be challenging Roman Reigns this Friday on SmackDown for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. Backstage, Sarah Schreiber catches up with Riddle. Riddle says that he thrives under pressure, and he's looking forward to getting vengeance on Reigns on Friday. Pretty much what he said on Talking Smack the other day. So this really was nothing new. He wasn't all smiles. He wasn't in goofy mode as he tends to be sometimes. This was a straightforward Riddle, which is great. But, I mean, this interview lasted all of like fucking 30 seconds, and he said absolutely nothing of no or new that we didn't already hear on Talking Smack on Saturday. So kind of a waste of an interview. To close out the show, Peter Rosenberg previews Roman Reigns versus Riddle for SmackDown on Friday. He talks about Roman Reigns, his dominance, and the type of opponent that Riddle might be for him. Camp praises Riddle's recent high-profile wins in singles competition, beating Sami Zayn, beating the Usos, beating a variety of other people, and that he's not one to take lightly, although his money will never not be on Roman Reigns, because the guy's been champion for so long, how can you bet against Roman Reigns in any situation? They also talk about Money in the Bank, and Rosenberg says that Money in the Bank is a big night for Rollins. Coming off his 3 losses to Cody Rhodes on pay-per-view, he needs this win to get back on track. And Camp says not only does he need this win, he's picking Rollins to win the whole thing, which I'm honestly currently agreeing with. RJ and I talked about it on WrestleRant Radio last week. I ran the clip here on the channel on Thursday of last week, but Rollins definitely has got to be the top men's favorite. Not that I'm like overly dying to see it, but I feel like the storyline possibilities there would be really interesting with him, teasing the cash on Roman Reigns. And when Rollins cashed in with the greatest cash-in of all time back at WrestleMania 31, Roman was involved in that match. He didn't technically cash in on Roman. It was more so Brock, as Brock was the champion. But he pinned Roman to win the championship that night. And that was the greatest cash-in of all time, no doubt. So, Rollins has got to be considered a favorite without a doubt. I mean, I don't necessarily want him to win, but it would be interesting. And I wouldn't want him to win the championship anyway by pinning Roman. I would much rather it be... I don't love the idea of it being Drew, but I'd rather it be Drew than Seth. And it really should be Cody, but that's just my opinion. And then to end here, they hyped up Drew McIntyre and Doudrop for the bump on Wednesday. So, a pretty average edition of Raw Talk this week. Nothing of note. The MVP Omos interview, pretty straightforward. The Riddle interview was almost blinking you missed it. And then the Alexa Bliss and Liv Morgan interview was fine. So if you're a big Alexa Bliss and Liv Morgan fan and want to see more interaction between the two beyond what we saw in the ring on Monday, this episode of Raw Talk is probably for you. But that's it for Raw Talk for June 13th, 2022. Thank you guys for checking out my review of the show. I appreciate it. Be sure to like this video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. We're going to have a Miz and Mrs. review from the latest review of Miz and Mrs. for Monday. That should be up tomorrow. #AskGSM. I got to get back into the whole GSM for GM videos. I just haven't had time to record it lately, so that should be up at some point in the next couple of weeks. WrestleRant Radio excerpts every single Thursday. Table for 3, new episode debuting on Thursday. I have not had a chance to catch any of the Broken Skull sessions for like the last 2 or 3 months. I will catch up on those at some point. Friday, we got I don't even remember, but probably the Table for Three review, Saturday SmackDown reviews, Sunday Talking Smack reviews, and a lot of interviews thrown in along the way as well. I just dropped my interview with Joe Gacy on Monday from last week, from before TakeOver in Your House, so check out that interview with that NXT star. And as I mentioned earlier, my interview with Raw superstar Elias, or rather not Elias, Ezekiel, Elias' younger brother. I got to get that right. That interview went up on Monday of last week, so check that out when you get a chance. Have a great rest of your week, folks. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.